Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to continue reacting to the story of Jennette McCurdy and her book, I'm Glad My Mom Died. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and professor. Let's watch.
It would take Jennette years to seek proper help and start therapy to begin grappling with her trauma.
I couldn't initially accept the idea that my mother was abusive toward me because my whole way of life, my whole way of going through the world I was operating through this lens of my mom wants what's best for me. Even after she died, I'm nothing without my mom.
Yeah, so she's speaking directly to that, I think. She entered therapy probably because her life was becoming unmanageable. I don't know if I show this clip, but her anorexia morphed into bulimia, and she also would abuse substances, I think alcohol, and she goes into treatment, she gets therapy, and it sounds like, I don't know, I'm reading between the lines, that her therapist was like, you were abused. You went through some horrific experiences. And Jennette is saying, initially, I couldn't accept that because that just completely did not compute with how I saw the world. My mom was the person in my corner. And I was talking about that earlier, that insidious nature that will happen. Not only will some abusers, some abusive parents go on a campaign to really gaslight you and make you feel like they are the most important person and they're not abusive, and that the message is like, if you leave me, your life is going to be so much worse off because look at all the things I'm doing. It's just constant messages. And we talked today about how there are echo chambers on the internet. Well, imagine if you have one person in your echo chamber saying the same thing over and over. Imagine if like Alex Jones was your housemate and you didn't have the internet. Like just, that's what it's like, because you're just getting this constant barrage of misinformation and no outlet, no other second opinion, right? And so you're just like, okay. And so she's like, at first I could not accept that my mom was being abusive. And then she said earlier, when I finally accepted that was a huge step forward. And yeah, often the reaction that I'll have as a therapist is countertransferential, meaning that, I won't go into the weeds on that, but essentially I have an emotion and a pain and an anger for the client. And when I have to make sure I'm noticing it, because if I don't, it'll be out of control. And the style of therapy that I use is I don't suppress the anger, but I harness it. And so I might say to the client, depending, there's a lot of different things to do, but I might say, so as you're telling me this story, I hear you kind of justifying what your mom did to you. And I wasn't there, so I don't know. And I can't tell you how to feel about it, but I'll tell you how I feel about it, which is I feel incredible pain for you. And I'm also incredibly angry about what your mom did to you. That was horrific. If I went through those experiences, I would be in so much pain and I'd be so angry about it. So I didn't even go through it. And I'm just hearing these stories from you and I'm livid at your mother. I can't believe she did those things to you. So I am expressing a feeling I'm actually having. I'm being authentic and genuine in the moment, but I'm also trying to help the client to see. And the idea, and usually what will happen, if not all the time, is the client will eventually, if I do this often enough, the client will feel like, God, you're right. I think I do feel angry about it. Now, I have to be careful because I don't want to do the same thing that the mom did, which is a whole other kind of ball of wax that can happen, is the therapist can become another invasive presence on the client and inject ideas that the therapist wants the client to feel. It's a very dangerous dynamic that can happen that a lot of therapists can fall into. There's always that temptation and there's always little dips into that a little bit, but you have to monitor that, know the signs of it, that kind of thing. But so even though you're modeling an emotion, you have to be careful not to pressure the client into adopting your point of view. You're trying to elicit something. You're trying to evoke something that's inside of them that they haven't been able to express because of the abuse that they went through.
I can't do anything without my mom. I'm incapable. I'm incompetent. What would mom want? What would mom think? What does mom need? That accepting that she was abusive would have meant reframing my entire life.
Yes, precisely. So it sounds like she's a very intelligent, wise person, and she's describing an experience that a lot of people have, which is that, so in order for me to accept that my mom was even kind of abusive, I have to accept that my entire narrative of my entire life is not true. And I have to rewrite my story from day one, because how challenging that is. It's like, mom is everything. Mom is in my corner. Mom is a good mother. I deserved it. Yes, calorie restriction is a good idea. That is the road to success. I do deserve that. This is the right way. This is okay. This is okay. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait, so if that starts to get torn down, that means that wasn't right. That means that wasn't okay. Does that mean anything is true? Like, your whole world gets flipped over, not just regarding your mom, but you become flipped over 100. Am I a good person? Am I worthy? Did I do anything good in life? Does anyone really like me? You have to accept the possibility that everything you think and everything that you know is a falsehood. Now, with people that I will work with on this, I will try to manage that and section out some things, and as they go through that, I will try to anchor them and say, so I want to tell you that there are parts of your narrative that are absolutely true in my opinion, which is, one, that you did accomplish things, and that, two, you are a good person, and three, your mom did love you in her way. It was abusive, so you don't have to flip everything on its head. But there are some things that you've been convinced of in an abusive way that probably should be questioned. And that process can take a long time. I can work with a client for 20 years and get like halfway down that road, just because of how insidious and how ingrained in one's personality. Because if you're indoctrinated into a way of thinking since day one, plus if you're still in a relationship with that parent as an adult, it can be really hard to challenge that narrative.
And that felt impossible. I couldn't go near that for a long time.
Jennette says that building a new life without her mom began with a stunning decision to leave acting behind.
Why?
And I want to say this as well, that it's a stereotype that therapists are just in it to get clients to hate their parents. And so I want to counter that by saying it's actually not my intention when I have a client that seems to be pre-aware of the abuse that they went through. I don't want them to hate their parents. I want them to feel however they want to about their parents after they go through a phase of discovery and recovery. At the end of that, even during it, they might still love their parents. They might still want to be with their parents. And so I don't have any kind of interest in that. They might also hate their parents and never want to see them again. That's up to them. What I am doing is I am validating, and I'm also helping them to see the truth, so to speak, so that they can have self-compassion. Because in order for the individual to recover and to heal and to get to know themselves and to stop blaming themselves for everything, is to identify the abuse as abuse and to identify the abusive person as an abusive person. Once they can do that, they can say, oh, it's not my fault. It was their fault. They made it my fault, but it wasn't my fault. It was their fault. And being able to tease that out is an incredibly important developmental process that people need to go through this, because imagine you're going through life and something goes wrong and you haven't been through this discovery process and this recovery. Everything's your fault. When your partner has a bad day, it's your fault. When your child gets an F on their test, it's your fault. When your child falls down on accident, it's your fault. When the global warming is happening, it's your fault, literally. It's just like everything is my fault. But there's a part of the individual that also kind of knows it's not my fault. And so there'll be this dynamic, this complex of the individual is just like, it's always your fault, everything's your fault. And the other is just like, no, it's not my fault. And in order to mature and actually evaluate because some things are your fault. So sometimes you have to actually say, it was my fault. And so in order to be able to say that, you have to be out of this complex, because when you have this complex, the acknowledgement that it was my fault causes people to fall off a cliff into shame and despair and to feel abused. So there's this back and forth between denial of just like, nothing is my fault and everything's my fault. Whereas we want to get people to say, sometimes it's your fault, but often it's not. But sometimes it is. And that doesn't make you a bad person. We are 97% good and 3% we have some issues. We make mistakes. We are impulsive. We are reactive. We're unfair some of the time. And that's normal and that's okay. That doesn't generalize to the rest of us. We can stand tall and say, I made a mistake, because I know on the inside that I'm mostly okay as a human being, because other people have shown me and told me that I'm mostly okay as a human being.
Quit acting.
It was important for my recovery at the time. It represented my mom living vicariously through me. It represented something that my mom wanted that I didn't want. So it was important for me to step away in a very definitive way and really just focus completely on healing myself.
Reflecting back on her.
And that's really great. It sounds like she knew that life in Hollywood was not for her. And you could just see so many other people continuing the self-abuse by continuing to put themselves into abusive work environments. And she was like, not for me. So that's a huge strength that she has. Early in life, she just recognized, I don't think this is good for me, even though there's all the temptation and everyone wants me to do it.
In her book, she writes that after Sam and Cat was canceled, Nickelodeon offered her a $300,000 thank you gift if she agreed to never speak publicly about her experience at the network, specifically with a man she refers to as the creator, who on one occasion, she says, encouraged her to drink while she was still underage and gave her a shoulder massage.
Yikes. Yeah, there are a lot of accounts of this kind of abuse happening in Hollywood. It has to stop. We're probably watching television shows with child actors or even adult actors who are being treated this way on set. And it makes sense when you think about it. You have all these children who want to be on these shows. You have all these parents who are desperate to have some fame and some success and have some notoriety. So, think Britney Spears family, this kind of thing. It's just like, okay, I can sort of ride on the coattails of my child star. And then you have all this money. You have the shows who they don't necessarily care about these human beings. They're just trying to be famous themselves or be successful, sell ads, this kind of thing. And then you're going to attract certain kinds of individuals who want to prey on people, including children, and know that, well, if you're on set, the parents aren't there, the kids will pretty much do whatever you want them to do because they want to get the part. You're also paying them a lot of money. We need so many more systems in place to stop this from happening. And I know there are systems in place now, more so than there were in the past. There are proposals to add more protections to children. That has to happen. That just has to happen. We live in a society that mostly knows about these kinds of things, and yet it's still happening right underneath our noses. It's just deplorable. We should all be looking at ourselves to some extent about that. So yeah, it's just awful. And then to think that an organization like Nickelodeon, or at least some people in the organization, would know, oh, if Jennette talks about it to the press, it could ruin us. And so, hey, here's $300,000 to never talk about what happened. I mean, suspicious. It's highly suspicious. I don't understand how we live in a country where that is possible, that you could actually pay someone who actually might really need the money, right? And say it is illegal for you to tell the truth about what happened to you. Like, I don't understand how that's legal.
Leaning against, I think I talk about this in the book, but I lean against my bed and I'm like, well, shoot, that could have put my nieces through college. Like, that was some good money. But I am ultimately proud of my decision there, wherever it came from. Even if it was informed by self-righteousness, I think that I did something that was really hard to do. Oh my God, it makes me emotional. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, she seems like a really humble person, very level-headed, really. And she's like, yeah, I don't know why I said no, and then I instantly kind of regretted it, but I don't know where it came from. Looking back, I'm really proud of myself, and then she starts to tear up. Yeah, it's a very human moment right there. And I want to remind people that people are attacking her because she has a book that is titled, I'm Glad My Mother Died, I'm Glad My Mom Died, without any knowledge of the backstory. Just people attacking her. And this is why I don't go on Twitter, because I very rarely do. And my experiences on Twitter are actually pretty good, but I hear so many bad things about Twitter. And I'm just like, ugh.
What's your body image now, and what's your relationship to food like, and how do you sort of go about your day?
I'm glad you asked this, because when people talk about eating disorder recovery, they talk about it being such an ongoing process and something you deal with every single day for the rest of your life, and it's always a battle. And I think that kind of language, it doesn't help motivate. I'm at a place.
Yeah, that's not true. I think that what I'll say, I don't know who she was talking to, but some people will say that. They will say with eating disorders, it is an ongoing battle. I think maybe people are motivated to say that because they want to help people to realize that unless they have a pretty robust system, they can easily fall back into it, which often does happen when people don't have robust systems in place, when they don't have ongoing treatment, when they don't have support systems, when they don't have self-awareness, when they go through additional traumas, because, life throws curveballs sometimes. So I think that's why they would say it, but I don't think any expert would say you're doomed for life and you'll never be able to relax a little bit on the other side of recovery, because that's just not true. Plenty of people go through recovery and have to manage very little. They probably always need to manage somewhat, have some awareness like, oh, I think I might be going down a road. I don't know. Let's monitor that. Let's look at that. So yeah, there's no way you're just doomed if you have an eating disorder.
When people talk about eating disorder recovery, they talk about it being such an ongoing process and something you deal with every single day for the rest of your life, and it's always a battle. And I think that kind of language, it doesn't help motivate. I'm at a place now where I don't obsess about food at all. I haven't engaged in any sort of disordered eating behavior for years. I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not uncommon. For some people, that is hard to attain or it takes longer. But for her to describe that, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. And I wouldn't be worried about her in this way. Sometimes you'll hear me talk about some people that seem to be in denial about their recovery process. But the way she's talking, it doesn't sound like that at all.
Grief for me toward my mom used to be really complicated. I'd feel really angry and confused at why I felt angry that I was grieving her. I felt like she didn't deserve my tears and my sadness and she was abusive. But it simplified in a really relieving way and now feels like I'm able to just miss her. And I think that is only possible because of the healing that happened.
Yeah, interesting. So I was talking earlier about how when you have an abusive parent and they die, the child, the victim, will have complicated feelings about that loss. On one hand, she's saying, I was sad and I was crying that mom was gone, but I was also angry at myself and didn't want to give my mom those tears and that sadness. And as I recovered and was able to heal, I now can just feel like I miss her. Often, if you haven't been through an experience like this, you might hear someone go through an abusive childhood and you think, well, that person must hate their parents. But your parents are your parents and they are not always abusive. There's tender moments and loving moments, or at least kind of positive moments. You depend on that person, and so you will simultaneously be terrified and harmed by this parent and also very attached and have positive feelings and not want them to leave you. And that can really cause a lot of confusion for the individual, which, obviously therapy can help sift through.
Through the writing of the book.
You miss her?
I do at times, yeah. I do at times.
You seem so calm about it now. What do you hope people take away from the book?
Do I seem calm? That's great.
I don't like that question at all, because at the very least it's tone deaf to the very real message that's often given to women about their emotions and their reactivity to things, that unless they're crying or upset or in a fetal position, that they must not be having genuine feelings. We don't typically do this to men. Certainly we can do it to men, but we do it to women almost all the time. She is talking about things that she's been recovering from for years. A lot of therapy, and she's on it, and she's written about it. She's cried the tears. She's had the anger. She's had the joy. She put it into a book, and now she's on television giving an interview. Why should she be having emotions, visible emotions? And also, what do emotions look like? You can be incredibly sad and not indicate it physically. You can be anxious and not indicate it physically. You can be joyous. I remember, I don't remember, well, maybe I kind of remember, but there's a story in my family about my parents trying to get me to smile when I was a kid. And certainly I did smile a lot, but in this moment, my mom's like, smile, Kirk, I'm trying to get a good picture of you. Smile. I'm like, I am smiling. And mom's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm smiling on the inside. So sometimes you're smiling on the inside, you're not smiling on the outside. for whatever reason. So she is talking about something that's very difficult, but she's not exhibiting hysterical emotional responses, that kind of thing. Hysterical in quotes I give. And so the question of, you seem so calm right now. And then she's like, I do? Like, I don't feel calm. This is very difficult for me. So yeah, it's, now I don't know where the interviewer is coming from.
My heart's kind of beating right now, so that's awesome. I'm hiding it well. I hope people, I put all of myself into this book, 110% of myself. I said a lot of things, a lot of uncomfortable truths that are, I think, difficult things to say. The more uncomfortable something was for me to put on the page, the more important it felt for me to put it on the page. That kind of honesty has been truly liberating for me.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.